In the far reaches of the galaxy, a small but thriving human colony existed on the planet Zephyrus. The colonists had fled Earth generations ago, seeking a new life free from the overcrowding and strife that plagued their homeworld. On Zephyrus, they found a peaceful existence, tending to their crops and raising their families under the light of a foreign sun. However, the tranquility of Zephyrus was shattered by the arrival of the Galactic Empire, a ruthless and tyrannical regime that sought to bring all worlds under its control. The empire cared little for the rights or well-being of its subjects, seeing them merely as resources to be exploited. The human colonists of Zephyrus soon found themselves living under the oppressive rule of the empire. Imperial soldiers patrolled the streets, enforcing harsh laws and quashing any signs of dissent. The colonists were forced to pay exorbitant taxes and provide labor for imperial projects, leaving them little time or resources for their own needs. One day, a young human child named Leela was playing in the streets of the colony's main settlement. In a moment of innocent rebellion, she picked up a rock and threw it at an imperial drone that was buzzing overhead. The rock struck the drone, causing it to crash to the ground in a shower of sparks. The response from the Empire was swift and brutal. A squad of Imperial soldiers descended upon the settlement, their weapons drawn. They dragged Leela from her home, ignoring the pleas and cries of her parents. In the center of the town square, before the eyes of the entire colony, the soldiers executed Leela for her act of defiance. The colonists of Zephyrus were shocked and outraged by this wanton act of cruelty. They had endured the Empire's oppression for years, but the killing of an innocent child was a step too far. The colony's leaders gathered in secret to discuss what must be done. They knew they stood no chance against the might of the Empire alone. Zephyrus was a small, isolated colony with few resources and no military to speak of, but they also knew they could not let this injustice stand. They had to send a message not just to the Empire, but to all of humanity, that even in the darkest reaches of space, there were some acts that could not be tolerated. The leaders of Zephyrus decided to send a distress call to Earth, hoping that their distant homeworld would hear their plea and come to their aid. They knew it was a desperate gamble. Earth was far away, and might not even receive their message. And even if they did, there was no guarantee they would be willing or able to help. But the colonists of Zephyrus had to try. They owed it to Leela, and to all those who suffered under the Empire's rule. And so, with heavy hearts and a grim determination, they sent their call for help out into the void of space, praying that someone, somewhere, would hear them. Little did they know that their message would indeed reach Earth, and that it would spark a response beyond anything they could have imagined. For when the people of Earth learned of the Empire's cruelty, they did not cower in fear or turn away in apathy. Instead, they rose up in righteous fury, determined to bring the full might of human wrath down upon the Galactic Empire. The stage was set for a conflict that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy, a war between the tyrannical empire and the united forces of humanity, fighting not just for the fate of one small colony, but for the soul of all sentient life. The distress call from Zephyrus reached Earth, traveling across the vast distances of space. When the message was received, it caused an immediate uproar among the people of Earth. News of the Empire's cruel act spread like wildfire, igniting a fury in the hearts of billions. People from all walks of life, politicians, soldiers, scientists, and ordinary citizens, were united in their outrage. They had long known of the Galactic Empire's tyranny, but the destruction of a human child was an atrocity they could not ignore. The cry for justice and retribution echoed across the planet. Earth's leaders convened an emergency meeting to decide their course of action. They knew that challenging the Empire would be no easy task. The Empire's military might was unrivaled, and its reach spanned countless star systems. But they also knew that they could not stand idly by while their fellow humans suffered. In a historic decision, Earth's governments agreed to put aside their differences and unite against the common enemy. They would send a message to the Empire and to the entire galaxy that human life was sacrosanct and that any attack on their species would be met with overwhelming force. The leaders announced their plan to the people of Earth. They would build the largest fleet of warships in human history, a force so powerful that even the Empire would tremble before it. The fleet would consist of 700,000 vessels, each one equipped with the most advanced weapons and technology Earth had to offer. The scale of the undertaking was staggering. Building such a vast fleet would require an unprecedented mobilization of resources and manpower. But the people of Earth did not hesitate. Factories that had once produced consumer goods were retooled to churn out ship components. Research labs worked around the clock to develop new weapons and defensive systems. Millions of men and women volunteered for military service, eager to play their part in the coming fight. As the fleet began to take shape, Earth's leaders selected the most skilled and experienced officers to lead it. The fleet admiral was a battle-hardened veteran who had spent decades patrolling the fringes of human space, defending colonies from pirate raids and alien incursions. The fighter pilots were the best of the best, men and women with lightning reflexes and nerves of steel. And the intelligence officers were masters of espionage and tactics, able to outthink and outmaneuver any foe. While Earth prepared for war, news of their fleet reached the Galactic Empire. The imperial leadership was at first dismissive, confident in their own strength. But as reports of the fleet's size and capabilities continued to arrive, they began to grow uneasy. They had never faced a human force of this magnitude before. The Empire began to mobilize its own forces, calling in ships and troops from across its vast domain. They would not let this upstart species challenge their authority. If Earth wanted a war, the Empire would give them one. A war that would end with the total subjugation of the human race. As the two sides readied themselves for the coming conflict, the galaxy held its breath. The stage was set for a confrontation unlike any it had ever seen before, a clash of civilizations, a battle for the very future of sentient life. The humans of Earth were ready to fight, to bleed, to die for their cause. They would show the Empire, and anyone else who dared to threaten them, the true strength and resolve of the human spirit. As the human fleet approached the Zephyrus system, they were immediately met by the Empire's forces. The Imperial ships formed a vast blockade around the planet, their hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun. The Empire's fleet was a formidable sight, with thousands of ships of all sizes and configurations, from small, agile fighters to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the largest of the human vessels. But the humans were not intimidated. Admiral Stavros ordered the fleet to assume attack formation, with the battleships at the center and the smaller vessels arranged in a defensive screen. The fighters, led by Marcus Rees, were launched from the carriers and took up positions on the fleet's flanks. As the two fleets closed in on each other, the Empire opened fire first. A barrage of laser beams and plasma bolts streaked across the void, impacting on the human ship's shields in dazzling displays of light and energy. The human fleet returned fire, their own weapons cutting through the Empire's defenses with devastating precision. Despite being outnumbered, the human ships proved to be more than a match for their Imperial counterparts. The human vessels were faster and more maneuverable, able to evade the Empire's fire and strike at their weak points. The human weapons were also more advanced, with railguns that could penetrate even the thickest armor and missiles that could track and pursue their targets with relentless determination. In the midst of the battle, Marcus Rees and his fighter squadron made a daring attack run on one of the Empire's dreadnoughts. Dodging and weaving through a hail of anti-aircraft fire, they managed to get in close and launch a volley of torpedoes at the massive ship's engines. The resulting explosion tore the dreadnought apart, sending it spiraling into the depths of space. The loss of one of their capital ships sent a shockwave through the Imperial fleet. They had not expected the humans to be so capable, so fierce in their resolve. The Empire's commanders began to realize that they had underestimated their enemy, and that this would not be the swift and easy victory they had anticipated. As the battle raged on, the human intelligence officer Naomi Seto was hard at work analyzing the Empire's tactics and looking for weaknesses to exploit. She noticed that the Imperial ships seemed to be relying heavily on a single command ship, a massive vessel that was coordinating the movements of the entire fleet. Seto relayed this information to Admiral Stavros, who immediately saw the opportunity. She ordered a focused attack on the command ship, with the battleships concentrating their fire on its shields while the fighters and bombers moved in to strike at its critical systems. The gambit worked. Under the relentless assault of the human ships, the Empire's command vessel began to buckle. Its shields failed, and explosions blossomed across its hull as the human weapons found their marks. Finally, with a blinding flash of light, the ship exploded, breaking apart into a million fragments. The loss of their command ship threw the Imperial fleet into disarray. Without central coordination, the individual ships were vulnerable and isolated. The human fleet pressed their advantage, picking off the Imperial vessels one by one until what remained of the once mighty armada turned and fled, retreating back into the depths of space. The humans had won the day, but they knew that this was only the beginning. The Empire would not take this defeat lightly. They would regroup, resupply, and return with an even greater force. But for now, the humans savored their victory and began to plan for the battles yet to come. On the bridge of her flagship, Admiral Stavros looked out at the wreckage of the Imperial fleet drifting through space. "This is a momentous day," she said to her crew. "But it is only the first step. We have shown the Empire that we will not go quietly into the night, that we will fight for our freedom, for our very survival. And we will not stop until the job is done." Emboldened by their victory in the Zephyrus system, the human fleet set out to take the fight to the Empire. Admiral Stavros and her commanders knew that they couldn't afford to rest on their laurels. The Empire still vastly outnumbered them, and they needed to strike quickly and decisively to maintain their momentum. The fleet's first target was a key Imperial supply depot on the planet Arcturus. Intelligence reports suggested that the depot was lightly defended, as the Empire had not yet had time to bolster its defenses in the wake of the human attack. Admiral Stavros saw this as the perfect opportunity to deal a crippling blow to the Empire's logistics. As the human ships emerged from hyperspace near Arcturus, they were met with a sight that no one had expected. Hanging in orbit around the planet was not just a small contingent of Imperial ships, but a full battle group, complete with a massive dreadnought at its center. For a moment, the human fleet was taken aback. They had not anticipated such a strong Imperial presence. But Admiral Stavros did not hesitate. She ordered the fleet to engage, knowing that every moment of surprise was precious. The battle was fierce and bloody. The Imperial ships fought with a desperate ferocity, knowing that the fate of their supply line hung in the balance. But the humans were equally determined, and they brought to bear the full might of their advanced weapons and technology. In the end, it was the skill and courage of the human fighter pilots that turned the tide. Led once again by Marcus Rees, they executed a series of daring attack runs, weaving through the Imperial defenses and striking at critical weak points. The Imperial dreadnought, for all its size and power, could not withstand the onslaught, and it exploded in a blinding flash of light. With their flagship destroyed, the remaining Imperial ships fell into disarray. The human fleet seized the opportunity and pressed the attack, overwhelming the Imperial defenses and securing control of the planet. The news of the human victory at Arcturus spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy. On planet after planet, the oppressed peoples who had long suffered under the Empire's rule began to look to the humans as their saviors. Uprisings and rebellions broke out, as the downtrodden masses took up arms against their Imperial overlords. The Empire, faced with this growing unrest, began to pull back its forces, seeking to consolidate its grip on its core worlds. But the humans were relentless. They struck at the Empire's retreating fleets, harrying them at every turn and forcing them to fight on the defensive. At the forefront of this offensive was Naomi Sato and her team of intelligence operatives. Using a network of spies and informants, they were able to anticipate the Empire's movements and provide Admiral Stavros with the information she needed to stay one step ahead. They also worked to foment rebellion and dissent within the Empire's ranks, undermining its ability to fight back effectively. But even as the tide began to turn in favor of the humans, they knew that the war was far from over. The Empire was still a formidable foe, with vast resources and a ruthless determination to maintain its grip on power. And there were rumors of a new weapon being developed in the depths of Imperial space, a weapon that could shift the balance of power back in the Empire's favor. As Admiral Stavros looked out over the star map in her command center, she knew that the challenges ahead would be greater than any they had faced before. But she also knew that the human spirit was indomitable, that they would fight on, no matter the odds, until the galaxy was free from the Empire's tyranny. The road ahead would be long and hard, but with courage, unity, and an unwavering resolve, anything was possible. Just as the human fleet was beginning to think that victory might be within their grasp, the Empire struck back with a vengeance. From the depths of Imperial space, a new fleet emerged, larger and more powerful than any the humans had yet faced. At its head was a new commander, Admiral Zoran, a ruthless tactician known for his uncompromising strategies and his utter devotion to the Imperial cause. Admiral Stavros and her crew were initially confident that they could handle this new threat just as they had all the others. But as the two fleets clashed in the skies above the planet Theron, it quickly became clear that this was a different kind of fight. Admiral Zoran's ships were equipped with new weapons, shielding technology that the humans had never seen before. The Imperial ships seemed to shrug off even the most powerful of the human weapons, while their own attacks cut through the human defenses like a hot knife through butter. In the midst of this chaos, tragedy struck. Marcus Rees, leading his squadron in a desperate attack run against one of the Imperial dreadnoughts, was hit by a barrage of enemy fire. His ship exploded in a blinding flash, and the brave pilot was lost. The loss of Rees was a devastating blow to the human fleet, both tactically and emotionally. He had been one of their best and most daring pilots, and his courage had inspired them all. But there was no time to grieve. The battle was still raging, and the humans were now on the defensive. Admiral Stavros, realizing that they were outmatched, gave the order to retreat. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but she knew that to stay and fight would be to invite total annihilation. The human ships pulled back, leaving the planet Theron in the hands of the Empire. But the losses were not over. As the fleet was making its escape, the Empire unleashed its new weapon. It was a massive energy beam, fired from a specially constructed base on a nearby moon. The beam sliced through space, cutting a swath of destruction through the human fleet. Several ships were destroyed outright, while others were left crippled and drifting. Among the ships lost was the carrier Intrepid, along with all its crew and fighter complement. It was a loss that hit Naomi Sato particularly hard. Her brother had been serving aboard the Intrepid. The intelligence officer, usually so stoic and composed, found herself fighting back tears as she processed the news. In the aftermath of the battle, the human leaders were left to contemplate their next move. They had suffered heavy losses, both in ships and in personnel. The Empire's new weapon had proven to be a game-changer, and they needed to find a way to counter it if they hoped to have any chance of success. But even as they grappled with these challenges, they received another piece of troubling news. The uprisings that had been sparked by their earlier victories were being brutally suppressed by the Empire. On planet after planet, Imperial forces were cracking down on the rebels, using any and all means at their disposal. The death toll was staggering. Faced with this grim reality, Admiral Stavros and her commanders had a difficult decision to make. Did they press on with their offensive, risking more losses in the hopes of a decisive victory? Or did they pull back, regroup, and try to find a way to counter the Empire's new advantages? It was a question with no easy answers, but as they debated and discussed, one thing remained clear: the fight for freedom, for the very soul of the galaxy, was far from over. The road ahead would be long and hard, and the cost would be high. But the humans, united by their common cause and their indomitable spirit, would not give up. They would fight on. no matter the odds, until the end. In the weeks following their devastating defeat at Theron, the human fleet regrouped and licked their wounds. They mourned their lost comrades, repaired their damaged ships, and sought to come to terms with the new reality of their struggle against the Empire. But even in their darkest hour, they did not despair. Admiral Stavros and her commanders worked tirelessly to analyze the Empire's new weapons and tactics, seeking any weakness they could exploit. And Naomi Sato, driven by a personal vendetta against the Empire that had taken her brother, threw herself into her intelligence work with a newfound fervor. Their efforts soon bore fruit. Sato's operatives managed to infiltrate the Empire's communications network and learned of a massive gathering of Imperial ships in the Zeta Aquila system. The Empire, it seemed, was preparing for a final, decisive strike against the human fleet. Admiral Stavros saw this as their chance. If they could catch the Empire's fleet unawares and strike a crippling blow, they could turn the tide of the war in their favor. It was a risky gamble, but it was one they had to take. As the human fleet set out for Zeta Aquila, they knew that this would be their final stand. Win or lose, the outcome of this battle would determine the fate of the galaxy. When they arrived in the system, they found the Imperial fleet waiting for them. It was a vast armada, even larger than the one they had faced at Theron, with Admiral Zoran's dreadnought at its heart. The battle began with a furious exchange of fire, the two fleets pounding each other with everything they had. The human ships, armed with new countermeasures developed by their scientists, were able to hold their own against the Empire's advanced weapons. But the sheer numbers of the Imperial fleet began to take their toll. In a desperate gamble, Admiral Stavros ordered a concentrated attack on Zoran's flagship. If they could take out the enemy commander, she reasoned, it would throw the Imperial fleet into disarray. The human ships formed up and made a daring charge towards the Imperial dreadnought, weaving through a storm of enemy fire. Many were destroyed or disabled, but a small group, led by a newly promoted Marcus Reese II, managed to break through the Imperial defenses and unleash a barrage of torpedoes at the dreadnought's bridge. The resulting explosion was spectacular. Zoran's ship was torn apart, and the Imperial fleet, suddenly leaderless, fell into chaos. The human ships pressed their advantage, picking off the disorganized Imperial vessels one by one. In the end, it was a stunning victory for the humans. The Imperial fleet was utterly destroyed, and with it, the Empire's grip on the galaxy was broken. On planet after planet, the news of the Empire's defeat sparked renewed uprisings, and the Imperial forces, now without reinforcements or resupply, were quickly overwhelmed. In the aftermath of the battle, as the human fleet licked its wounds and counted its dead, Admiral Stavros addressed her victorious crew. "Today," she said, her voice filled with emotion, "we have won not just a battle, but a future free from tyranny, where every sentient being can live in peace and freedom. And we have won it not just for ourselves, but for all the generations yet to come." As the fleet set out for home, they knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be much work to do, many challenges to face in building a new galactic order. But they faced those challenges united, bound together by the bonds of shared sacrifice and triumph. They had proven, beyond any doubt, the indomitable power of the human spirit. And in that spirit, they would go forward, always forward, into the stars. In the days and weeks following the decisive battle at Zeta Aquila, the galaxy began to put itself back together. The remnants of the Empire, scattered and leaderless, quickly capitulated, and the process of rebuilding and restoration began. It was a monumental task. The war had left deep scars, both physical and emotional. Entire planets had been ravaged, their populations decimated, their infrastructures destroyed. But the spirit of unity and cooperation that had been forged in the crucible of conflict now served to bring the galaxy together as never before. Under the leadership of Admiral Stavros and the other human commanders, a new galactic order began to take shape. It was an order based not on fear and oppression, but on the principles of freedom, justice, and mutual respect. The old barriers of race and species began to break down as beings from all corners of the galaxy worked side by side to build a better future. Central to this effort was the establishment of a new galactic council where representatives from every world could come together to discuss their common challenges and aspirations. It was a forum for dialogue, for understanding, and for the peaceful resolution of disputes. As the weeks turned into months, and the months into years, the galaxy began to heal. Cities were rebuilt, economies were restarted, and the wounds of war slowly began to fade. And though the scars would always remain, they served as a reminder of the price that had been paid and the importance of vigilance in preserving the hard-won peace. For the humans who had fought and bled and sacrificed to make this new era possible, there was a special place of honor. A grand memorial was erected on Earth, a towering monument to the fallen heroes who had given their lives in the cause of freedom. At its center stood a statue of a young girl, her face etched with a mixture of innocence and determination. It was Leela, the child whose tragic death had sparked the war, now forever immortalized as a symbol of the indomitable human spirit. And every year, on the anniversary of the final battle, the people of the galaxy would gather at this memorial to pay their respects. They would remember the courage and sacrifice of those who had fought and reaffirm their commitment to the ideals for which they had given their lives. For Admiral Stavros, who had led her people through their darkest hour, these annual gatherings were a time of reflection and recommitment. She would stand before the assembled masses, her voice ringing out with the same strength and conviction that had carried them through the war. "We stand here today," she would say, "not to glory in our victory, but to remember the price that was paid for our freedom. We stand here to honor those who fought and died, so that we might live in peace, and we stand here to reaffirm our pledge to each other and to all the peoples of the galaxy, that never again will we allow the forces of tyranny and oppression to threaten our liberty. That never again will we stand idle in the face of injustice. That always, always we will stand together, united in the cause of righteousness." And as the years passed, and new generations grew up in a galaxy at peace, the story of the Great War and the heroes who had fought it passed into legend. But always, the memory of their courage and their sacrifice remained, a shining beacon of hope and inspiration for all the ages to come. For this was the legacy of the human spirit, the indomitable will that had carried them from the caves of Earth to the stars themselves. And it was a legacy that would endure, as long as there were those who believed in the power of freedom and the unquenchable human thirst for a better tomorrow.